So I do have a question for you. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Have you thought that far out? Like, do you have a plan or what are you working towards?
You always got these headhunters or whatever, but these people call and, those conversations are very interesting to me because I learn what makes a business valuable by the questions that they ask, right? So 5 years in our business, the things that make our business valuable is...
Today's guest is Nate Taylor. He is the owner of New England Fleet Services. In this conversation, he shares insights from his 10-year journey running a commercial truck repair operation that spans both mobile services and a fully equipped 6,000 square foot facility.
Choose two paths right off the bat. You're either going to make every dollar you can on every job, even if it means dishonest, or you're going to choose to have an honest shop. And it's kind of like the hiring process has changed a little bit. And that's not an exaggeration. Like it used to be, you could put ad in, people looking for jobs would send you the resumes. But now it's more like the employer has to pay top dollar and you can go out there and invite people to your job and go through the resumes. I would rather a B tech with an awesome attitude than an A tech with a terrible attitude. I learned that the hard way, and lesson learned won't happen again.
What would you say today is one of your number one challenges you're facing in this industry?
To your point, and I'm glad that you brought that up, hands down, it's...
Welcome to Beyond the Bay. I'm your host, Peter Cooper. And today we have guest Nate Taylor with New England Fleet Services. Welcome on.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me on.
Tell me a little bit about your shop and your journey through this industry.
All right. So we opened up our shop, New England Fleet Services. We're in Connecticut. We opened it up 10 years ago. So this is kind of a big year, 10-year anniversary for us. And we do mostly commercial, business to business. We have mobile capabilities as well as fully equipped shop, a 6,000 square foot shop, which we're in the middle of expanding. And my experience, I actually come from the automotive world, not the commercial side of things. Worked at a mom and pop shop for 13 years. Shop from the guy who's going to retire. We were real close. He was a personal mentor. And when that slipped through the cracks, weren't quite able to get on the same page with the banks and the landlords who owned the property. My wife and I took the leap and we opened up our own shop.
And so congratulations, by the way, on that 10-year anniversary. You've made it longer than 98% of most small business owners, so you should be proud about that.
Yeah, when you look at the stats, it's scary, especially first year, 5 year, like you said, you hit the 10-year and, barring no huge issues, we're on a pretty good track.
So question for you. So being 10 years in this, I'm sure that with being around that long, you've seen enough cycles of business because, I think this industry does have a bit of a cycle. It goes through boom and bust. What would you say today is one of your number one challenges you're facing in this industry?
Hands down, it's HR related things. Up until recently, it was finding good techs. I just went through the hiring process, just hired our 5th tech here. And this was the first time in a long time where I actually got some high quality candidates that I was able to go through. And the cost of doing business, and most of that is HR related, specifically like healthcare costs. It's very hard to compete with the bigger companies and with the dealerships. And that's just fresh in my mind because we're open enrollment right now. So that's just like right in front of my face. And so by far healthcare costs. And I don't know which is worse. I don't know if it's, if I'd rather have issues finding good talent or issues keeping good talent happy. I don't know.
Well, I think that that's actually a balancing act that we all face in business. Even I went through it with my shop. We offered health insurance when most small shops didn't. And it really gave us a competitive edge. And that could be part of why you just said that it's easier for you to hire techs. Sometimes owners need to look backwards and look at their culture and say, I think what we're doing is right because we can hire good techs. And yes, it's a challenge paying for all these things. When you create an environment where people want to work, it's a lot easier to hire people.
Not to my own horn, but I was like an awesome employee. I made for like a really good employee. And I'd stuck with the guy for 13 years that I'd worked with. And I learned a lot from him. But working for somebody for that length of time before jumping into my own, I'm very much like an employee's boss. Because I see these guys and a girl. I hired a female tech last year. but I see them bust their butt day in and day out. And I know what that's like because I busted my butt day in and day out for somebody else also. So I'm very employee centric. And I've got a saying that I tell these guys is when the shop makes more money, everybody makes more money. And for the 10 years, I've really stuck with that. We don't have a high turnover as a result, but it takes a lot of money and takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to get the programs to treat these guys right so they stick around.
It is. And not everybody wants the same thing. I mean, you'll run into employees that some want higher pay and they don't want benefits. Others want benefits and reasonable pay. Others want more vacation. And that's another area that's challenging as a business owner is trying to offer kind of middle ground where it's attractive to almost anyone.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Everybody's needs different depending whether they have dependents, no dependents. Yeah,
Right.
you hit the nail on the head there.
I mean, I even went through that. So as a small shop, we would hire a lot of guys that had wives. Their wives had really good jobs because there's so much insurance based industry in Des Moines where my shop
Yeah.
was that they didn't need health insurance. And so that wasn't an issue to them. They didn't care. But they did care more about vacation. And so we had some other things that we would offer. We went down the path of figuring out that we could offer an HSA, which is or an HRA, so a health reimbursement account, where we literally just could give them cash essentially towards medical expenses. And it's a cool little loophole that only really small businesses qualify for. I think you have to have under 25 employees to be able to even offer that and have it be considered as something you can do. But there are some things that small shops have. They have niches they can get into, and there's tax breaks that aren't available to other businesses because you are small. Like doing a simple IRA, for example. You don't have to do a 401k. You could do a simple that essentially doesn't cost you anything but 3%. There's no admin fees, there's no other setup costs you have. Where if you were a big company like Rush, it costs a lot of money to administer a 401k plan.
To your point, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I bring up almost yearly retirement plans to my guys because I would love to offer them a retirement plan. And because healthcare costs are what they are, and this is like one of the biggest issues that I'm dealing with. They say, enough money's getting taken on my paychecks already, and they're not wrong. And no matter what route I go with health insurance, next year we're probably going to look at an HSA route just to kind of bring like the weekly costs down. But this is the problem with elevated costs. There's only so much money to go around. So, nobody's required to take health insurance here, but people here would rather have health insurance. It's a sad state of affairs when people have to choose between health insurance or retirement. As hard as we work, we should be able to have both, but that's just not the environment. And yeah, so that's again, not to be a broken record, but that's by far the biggest thing that we deal with, biggest struggle we
Well,
deal
and
with.
that's interesting because you kind of got a different situation than most, which is why it's so great talking to all these different business owners across the country. Um, that's not a challenge that I've heard in a very long time, that the cost of healthcare and the cost of admin and HR is what's prohibitive to business. And you're absolutely right. The cost of healthcare has gotten out of hand. And even if you raise your rates, there's a trickle down effect. You can't raise your rates fast enough to keep up with these massive 20% jumps in health premiums annually. I mean, you can't raise your rates, anywhere near that to keep up.
Yeah, I don't know where it is in other sides of other parts of the country, but my little team of like 8 people, I mean, we spent, this is not an exaggeration, about 100 grand last year in health insurance benefits between what I contribute and what they pay. That's an absurd amount of money for 8 people. I don't know if that's a Northeast thing. I know things tend to be a little more expensive, on the coasts in the Northeast, but that's just an absurd amount of money. You could do a lot with that kind of money if you didn't have to spend
You
it
can.
in
You can.
healthcare.
And if you look at the opportunity cost, if you could take that money and put it in retirement at an 8 to 10% yield per year fate versus health insurance, you'd really be somewhere. But unfortunately, it's kind of where we're at. There's other factors, the way inflation has gone and things like that. So it's definitely a challenge. And thank you for sharing that with us because not everybody's open and honest about that's one of their big challenges.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I love each and every person that I work with, and I want to see everybody do well, and I want to see everybody succeed. I want to see people be healthy, and I want to see people be rich. And when you're dealing with high overhead costs, everybody takes a hit.
Yeah, and I think that the people that are in these higher, urban areas or in the Northeast specifically, do face some challenges that some of us don't, like in the Midwest, where it is so prohibitive to do business. When I talk to different business owners in California and places like that, well, when I was at Diesel Connect, I was giving a speech on stage, and the lady asked me, she says, "Well, I know that you don't." She asked me a question. Said, "I know you don't like businesses in California." I said, you that's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say was, I don't know how you do it with what rent costs and all of these other factors you have going on. It's a
Yeah.
miracle that you guys are doing as well as you are.
Yeah, it's not easy, but it's what we sign up for as business owners,
Right.
right? I mean, we get paid to, what's say you get paid according to the problems that you solve, right? So we kind of
Right.
sign up for that, and it's the onus is on us, to provide good benefits and good pay and a healthy work environment for our employees.
Well, and I think this is a valuable lesson for anyone listening to this podcast is exactly that. That you're in a very lucky position that your biggest challenge is what it is, and you can only say that because you can hire good people.
But it's expensive to hire good people too. I mean, I've got shops around me that, hey, if you have a good candidate that you don't hire, send them my way. But I mean, I just went through the hire process and it cost thousands of dollars, and that's not an exaggeration. And it's kind of like the hiring process has changed a little bit. Like it used to be, you could put ad in Indeed, and people looking for jobs would send you the resumes. But now it's more like they leave the resumes out there, and the employer has to pay top dollar, and you can go out there and invite people to your job and go through the resumes. That's expensive. That's 75 bucks a day. You do the math. You're looking for somebody for a couple months. That's a lot of money.
Well, I think there's 2 reasons for that. Number 1, there are so many big corporations that just absolutely waste an employee's time when they go to apply for a job, and they get very discouraged. You say you apply for one of these big, massive multi-state chains, they run you through all this gamut of stuff, make you fill out these massive applications, make you go through 4 or 5 interviews just to ghost you or blow you off. And I think a lot of people have gotten discouraged by that because they see it as a waste of their time. And they know with the current state of affairs, with the way the hiring market is, that if they put their ad out there, they don't have to try very hard to get people coming to them. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think the industry has changed. I think that now you are not interviewing employees. I think that they're interviewing you. In other words, you're trying to sell them on working here, not the other way around. Like when I was coming through tech school and being an apprentice, you had to go sell yourself when you interviewed. Now it's the other way around. Now it's the shop trying to sell itself to the employee. And I don't think a lot of smaller independent shops are catching on that that's how things are going.
No, but you're 100%. You nailed it. Yeah, it very much, at the very least, a 50-50 split who's interviewing who. That's a really good point. And I'm okay with that. I mean, you can't be afraid to spend money if you want to get good talent, or if you want to expand, or if you want to attract people, if you want high quality customers, and you just can't be afraid of spending the money. Is what it boils
Right.
down to. Whether it's healthcare costs or marketing or hiring somebody, it is what it is.
Well, the other thing is too, is don't discount the fact that you can use mechanisms that don't cost money directly. And one of that is nothing recruits good new employees better than the employees you already have that are happy. So if you have happy employees that like to work there, you can use that as a tool to help, you know, bring in other people from outside areas, their friends, their family, their acquaintances, people they go to church with, people they go to book club with, whatever they do. And we call that working the grapevine. So basically, you got to get the word out that you're hiring good people. And it was like when I owned a limo company, I would have people randomly ask me if I was hiring, and I'm like, I always have room for a good driver. Because I hate to say this, but ultimately, if somebody really good shows up, we'll hire him. I can make room for him, and if that sometimes means that the low performing person's got to go, that's what's better for the business.
Kind of go back to the 10-year anniversary thing. I think that might have something to play with it. Something to do with hiring people and the quality of customers, because we have a history that when we can reach back now. I could say, well, I've had this tech with me for, almost the whole time, and this person for 7 years, this person for 5 years, and it paints a better picture of what the company's actually like. When you're just in business for 3 years, you got no history. So even as far as
Right.
bringing business in the doors, we're getting word of mouth business and just people, now we've got Google reviews and, these things. So there really is a difference, around that 10-year mark, when you've kind of had a footprint for a little while that people can look back on. And so, yeah, the word of mouth, the examples, that you gave 100%. And I've noticed that this time around. So maybe that's one reason I got, um, a better potential employee pool. Some of that may just have to do with how long we've been in business.
Well, part of it too, I think you're absolutely onto something, and that's that you've built a book of business, but you also built a reputation in your community and in your area. And I think this is a valid point to jump in. With so much talk right now about AI and how it's going to change our industry and how it's going to change the world, I think there's two things that are not going to change that are actually going to become more important. And I think that's reputation and relationships. AI is not going to replace relationships. It may have some effect on your reputation, but it's never going to have an effect on your word of mouth. So I think owners and just people in business in general need to understand that the relationships that you build and that energy you put into those relationships is going to pay 10x to whatever fancy tool you buy or whatever new paint you put on the outside of your building and look at attractive. There's no replacing those relationships.
Yeah, you're right. And that's really something that I learned, um, working for the guy before we opened a business here. His name was Dan, and he had awesome relationships with everybody around him, from other shops, customers, first name basis with everybody, and that was my mentor. That's where I came from. That's what I learned, and so from day one when we opened up, I went to the shops around me, introduced myself. They were able to do things I couldn't handle, so I was more than happy to sublet some things out and just starting those relationships based on handshakes, based on good faith. And I still have those relationships now, and it's paid off in spades, and not just money wise, but just reputation and relationship, and you can bounce ideas off each other, and it's helped out a lot.
And don't ever be afraid to build a relationship with your competition. So many people see the shop down the street as the competition. They are not your competition. They are your resource. I have made such big strides in my different business ventures because I was willing to work with my competition and look at them as a resource. The example I use when I owned a limo company, I could take on these massive contracts, these busing contracts, because I was willing to work with all my competition and basically show up with X number of vehicles. No one else could do that because they refused to work with their competition. And I think that same rule is going to apply in shops. I think you're going to see as these trucks become much more complex over time. We're having all these ADAS features, these advanced driver assistance come in. You're going to see shops become more and more specialized in we only work in Volvos, or we only work on pack cars, or we only work on X. And I think we're going to have that more and more because the days of one shop being able to work on everything from lawnmowers to tractors, I think those days are numbered. I mean, let's face it. If anybody here's ever tried working on a John Deere or anything lately, good luck. You can't get your hands on the software. You can't get your hands on technical information unless you can beg, borrow, and steal it from the dealer. And so, unless you're a specialized facility, some of these trucks, well, look at pack cars. I mean, you can't even change the road speed on a pack car now without a password from the factory.
Yep. Yeah, it's not wild. We run into all this. So now at this point, people ask if we could do that, and I just tell them, look, it's a 50-50 shot. We used to be able to do all of them, but now 50-50. And I don't see the rhyme or reason yet. I don't know. But software, you hit the nail on the head. And we spend, thousands of dollars on equipment and our own, diagnosis software. And there's still always the one thing that we need is the one thing we don't have. And that's where relations
Right.
step in. Even relationships with the dealerships. You got a good relationship with the service department and the dealerships. If you need something programmed that's only going to take an hour, you'd be surprised how quickly they could do it if you have that relationship with them.
Yes. I think that's valid too with parts. I can think of many cases where my parts vendor, I had really good relationship with the salesman, and they saved my butt because we did something wrong, or we forgot to order something, or we didn't understand this part was 2 days out versus next day. And there again, those relationships can save your business.
One of the dealerships that we work with, the regional parts guy, I mean, I got such a good relationship with him. If we're in a pinch, he'll go to a different part of the state to grab something that we need, if we're in a pinch and, if I say I am, there's like a trust thing there. I'm not going to say if I don't need it.
Yeah,
And, but he'll go out of his
absolutely.
way. It's just that relationship is the word.
Yeah, and it's hard to replace that. You can't replace that with even money, because money isn't gonna get that guy to drop what he's doing and drive. And I had a relationship with my parts vendor. I could call my Volvo dealer at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning on his personal cell phone, he'd answer, and I'd be like, "Hey, man, I need a starter. Like, I gotta get in the store and get a starter." And he'd go to the store and get me a starter. Like, you can't replace that with anything outside of relationships.
You're right. As old school as this sounds, 100%.
Well, I think that's where we're going. I think you're going to see some regression in this world because of technology and AI. People, their time's going to get freed up. They're not going to be doing all these remedial tasks that they used to do, and people are going to, they're either going to sequester and hide in their basement and play on their phone, or they're really going to, look to relationships. And I don't see too many business owners wasting their entire day scrolling Facebook. I think they're really going to invest in relationships, and they're going to look for those relationships more and more.
Yep, totally.
So I do have a question for you. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Have you thought that far out? Like, do you have a plan, or what are you working towards?
I think about it constantly. So I'm 42 years old right now. And, historically 40s and 50s are when kind of people are in their like biggest like earning decades. And what you do in your 40s, what you do in 50s, that's what sets you up for your, 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond, Lord willing. So 5 years, a couple different things. A big part of the value in a business is the real estate the business owns. So right now I lease, and we keep talking about relationship. I've got a great relationship with my landlord. The guy's been amazing. I've been leasing from him for 10 years, and he let me sign a lease without one customer, and he's just been amazing. I would love for there to be, and always keeping an eye out and investing and working towards real estate ownership, if for no other reason to increase the value of the business. You always got these, I don't know, you want to call them headhunters or whatever, but these people call and they kind of want to get the value of your business, see if they can buy the business so they can get bigger market share in the area. And those conversations are very interesting to me because I learn what makes a business valuable by the questions that they ask, right? So in our business, the things that make our business valuable is owning real estate, revenue being mainly mobile at customers on site ability. So right now we've got 3 service trucks and I got 3 people that could go out on the roads. But in having conversations with these people, that's what the bigger companies want, and that's where they see the value. And
They do.
they spend a lot of money trying to find companies of value. So if they say that's where the value is, you can kind of take them at their word for it.
The value
So for
the
the next
value is there because of scalability.
yes, 100%.
Because it's not
Yep.
hard to buy 3 more service trucks and hire 3 more techs. It can be hard
Sure.
to start 3 more shops or 3 more
Yes.
bays, or you got to understand that. So in a
Yep.
lot of what and I have a lot of experience with this. So a lot of what you're talking about, and you get these calls, and I'm sure a lot of other shop owners out there are getting these calls. So this is a really good conversation. There is a massive push in this industry for consolidation by private equity. We've already seen it in other skilled trades. We've seen it in plumbing. We've really seen it in the HVAC field. Like, you go to any major metropolitan area, and probably 80 to 90% of all the HVAC companies are owned by private equity. They are not family run businesses anymore, even though they'll still portray it that way. They are not. And we're
Yep.
starting to see this consolidation in shops. I can tell you there's a formula for it. Real estate is actually not part of it right now, but there's a caveat to that for the owner, and I'll get to that. They are looking for profitable shops that do mobile repair. And the reason why all of those factors are important is no one wants to buy a job. So any shop owner that's listening to this, I want you to hear these words. No one wants a job. People that buy businesses want an ATM. They want something that prints money. So if you're running your business in such a way that you don't care about profits, you need to care about profits. And there's other reasons for that too. Number one, you can't ever get money if something happens. And number two, God forbid anything ever happens to you. But if you're not running a profitable business, what are you leaving behind for your family and your employees? People have to think about that. Things happen every day that are outside of our control. And if you have not set your business up to run without you, you've just created a real big mess for your family. And what I was getting to with the real estate is you're absolutely right. Owning the real estate is the key to profitability for the owner. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you sell the property if you sell the business. So many of these private equities don't want to invest the extra millions of dollars it costs to buy the land. And they'll just tell you, look, we'll buy your business. You just keep leasing it back to us, which actually works out better for the owner because the owner can retire and still have this cash cow, print money every day, bringing in all this income, and they don't have to do basically anything. With a commercial property and your triple net leases, there's not a lot of work for the owner to do on that property. And so I think a lot of business owners need to think about their legacy plan a little bit more. And what am I going to do if something happens to me? What am I going to do if, I do get that offer? And even if you're not thinking about selling, I'll be honest with you, owners need to look at business different. I told a guy one time when he called me, I said, everything's for sale, buddy, even my dog.
Yeah, yeah. I think anybody who'd argue that point probably isn't being honest with themselves or honest with you. And again, there's nothing in me that wants to sell right now, but I learn a lot from those conversations. My wife thinks I'm silly for having those conversations with these people, but it's like anything's worth the conversation. You learn things. So
You
through
absolutely
those,
do.
so if that's what makes a company valuable, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it right. Okay. And the something I'm doing is owning a repair shop, and I want to do that right, which means making it valuable. So checking off those boxes, increasing our mobile capability and our mobile fleet, and getting mobile techs and real estate ownership. Those are the two biggest things on my radar right now.
And I think there's some value there too, as business owners to other business owners when you have mobile and a shop. The 100% mobile only businesses, let's face it, if you're a truck repair shop and you're 100% mobile, unless you have a really good customer that's got some kind of facility, they don't want you changing a transmission in their parking lot. They don't want you doing much more than pulling a radiator. They don't want you cracking open, especially fleet managers that know something. They don't want you cracking open and getting into the internals of an engine in their parking lot.
Yeah. Yep.
So there is value added there to the fact that you have a shop and have mobile. I think people need to not overlook that. In other words, if someone's looking to maybe expand or start their own business, there's still no replacement for having a brick and mortar. It also brings some kind of legitimacy to you. There's still a lot of, and with talking to some of these bigger fleets out there, they're still pretty skeptical of companies that are 100% mobile because they kind of see them as a little sketchy because most of them are, let's be honest.
Yeah. This industry is kind of weird in the sense that, like, if you're good, like an electrician or a plumber, like there's a lot of schooling that goes into getting the licenses to like be your own boss. The automotive industry, I mean, I don't know why, but you don't need that. And so yeah, and that's kind of like a stigma I think anybody who's in this business is fighting against to a certain extent. The first thing that you've got to prove to somebody is that you're being honest. I'm like, okay, there's
Right.
probably like a rule of thumb like in life, but in this trade, it just seems like upfront honesty, even with the bad news, goes so far because there's less of a vetting process than some of the other trades. Um,
Right.
you know,
And I think that's where core values come important. And I think that's where it's so important for business owners to be able to not only demonstrate core values, but actually put them on a poster, if you will. And I know that it's kind of overused, but I still don't see a replacement for having a core value of honesty and integrity. And, the definition of our integrity and our honesty with our customers was give them the truth, no smoke and mirrors. So if you and what that was is that was intended to like for a service advisor, for example, we found so many service advisors would avoid calling a customer with bad news. And they would sit there and they would fret over it. And then they would call the customer and say, hey, your engine's blown. You need a new engine. And the customer would be like, oh, yeah, we thought that's what we needed. What are we talking? $30,000, $40,000? Oh, yeah, it's about 41. Okay, yeah, go ahead and do it. And that's the whole conversation for a $40,000 repair.
yeah.
But they'll push it off for days making that phone call. And when you ingrain your people with this reality of, look, it is what it is, just tell them the truth and they're going to take it the way they take it. You can't control if they freak out about it. And if they do freak out, I can understand that. You're calling them. It's not the best day of their life. Imagine if somebody called you and said your house needed a $40,000 repair. It's a bit shocking.
Yeah, there's I went to some conference at some point, and the guy had this saying, "I didn't buy it, I didn't build it, I didn't break it." He said, "If you go
Yeah,
into
we call that the three B's in business.
what's that?"
It's the 3 Bs of running a shop. I didn't buy it, I didn't build it, I didn't break it. In
Yeah.
other words, don't make their problems your problems.
Right.
Instead of looking at it as a problem, this is your opportunity. You hear me out, shop owners, and especially service advisors. This is your opportunity to solve a problem and deliver on something. Because you're absolutely right. You didn't buy it, you didn't build it, you didn't break it, and they brought it to you because they want it fixed. So give them the solution of how to fix it. And if they have a momentary bad reaction, they're human. It's okay.
Yes, the phone call, to your point, you don't put it off. You hit it head on, you hit it quickly, sensitively, that's fine. But you get it out of the way, and just remember, you didn't buy it, you didn't build it, you didn't break it, and you're here to help the person. You said you're the solution to the problem. You're not bringing me the solution to the problem.
Well, and it's kind of like sometimes you have to call a customer and be like, hey, this part's really expensive. It's like, I used to tell customers, they're like, man, that's crazy expensive. X number of dollars for a cylinder head for a Volvo engine. I'm like, yeah, I know that sucks. This is what happens when you own a Volvo. Like, sometimes you just kind of got to be honest with them and be like, look, I understand these parts are expensive. If you had a Cummins, we would have aftermarket options. It wouldn't be so expensive. And we ran into that a lot with pack cars and Volvos. Yeah, the truck is reliable. Don't get me wrong. Some of the best trucks out there, but they can be hard to fix and they can be hard to get parts for.
Yeah. Remember the guy that, my mentor, he was, we got approval for a repair. I'll never forget this. We got approval for a repair, and he looked back on the service history and saw that there was, that it was going to be under warranty. He hadn't remembered it. Customer didn't remember it. So he calls the customer and says, hey, we did this for the last 12 months. So this one's going to be on us. And this was shortly after I first started there. And I told him, I was like, this is like a pretty stand-up thing, huh? And he goes, look, and I don't know, it's maybe he had a crystal ball. I don't know. He goes, look, if you ever go into business for yourself, choose 2 paths right off the bat. You're either going to make every dollar you can on every job, even if it means dishonest, or you're going to choose to have an honest shop. He goes, and then your next step is you hire the people around you to do the job how you want to have it be done. And he goes, I got to sleep at night. And I just never forgot that, So when we opened up the shop 10 years ago, I got a conscience anyway. So, it's not like I really had much of a choice, but the choice was there's enough honest work to be done where you don't need to be dishonest. And you hire the people around you that are going to fit that culture, because there are a lot of people that don't fit that culture. You can find people who, do whatever they're supposed to do, but I just had never forgotten that, and I always remembered it, and just the honest, the
I think that
straight.
plays to something too with owners, and that's whether you have a short-term or a long-term view of your business.
Yeah.
And when you're out there trying to get every penny you can get, and I'm not saying people that try to get every dollar out of a work order are dishonest, but if you're on that borderline of gray area and you're looking at a situation, I always encourage shop owners, go with the side that thinks is going to build the best relationship. Because I can tell you, as a matter of fact, I used to audit work orders at the end of the day or at the end of the week. I would go through random work orders and I would audit them. And I came across a work order one time of one of my best customers where I'm like, something doesn't seem right, because I know that truck was in here earlier this week. Long story short, the truck had been there earlier that week. We always promised all these fleets that, hey, every time we touch your truck, we're going to do a safety inspection. We're going to look it over to, help you try to stop these breakdowns. And the tech missed something. And that something caused progressive damage. And I called the customer and said, you know what? I don't think this is on you. I think this is on us. We missed this. And so I'm not going to charge you labor. I'm not going to charge you on parts for that repair. I'm just going to charge you for the parts that you would have had to pay for had we caught it when we caught it. And I'm sorry. And I had that customer forever. Like, that guy wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah. Yep. That's short-term pain for long-term gain. And I'm not just talking money gain, you and I said, the R word, relationship probably, 50 times in this thing, but that's kind of what it's all about, and you gain that. And once you're proven in that, it kind of takes a lot to lose it. You know what I mean? If you're just straightforward and that honesty, and you took a hit when you didn't have to take a hit, I mean, it's pretty stand up of you, and anybody with half a brain is going to see that. And that's the kind of person that you want to give your money to,
Well, and I encourage owners to do that. And it's not just for you or for them. It's about teaching moments to your staff. I mean, I would catch things all the time where I'd be like, okay, on the work order, it's set, we charge the customer for 10 gallons of oil, but the technician didn't write up that he added 10 gallons of oil to the truck. Not that it was necessarily bad, but it's like, hey, this is not how we do things here. I'd really like if we would. It's the trust but verify theory. I've always had this with employees. I trust my employees, but I'm going to verify it. I'm going to make sure it gets done right. And I'm going to make sure that everyone knows there's checks and balances. And that was part of our culture. You know, we had responsibility to each other, just like my employees, I was responsible to my employees. Like my employees could come to me and say, hey, we don't think this is right. We think this is what we should do to the customer. And I'd be like, that's right. Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe I'm looking at this wrong. And it built a much better culture in our shop.
Yep, culture, man. Almost nothing more important than the culture in the shop. I think it's so,
Well, it really isn't.
and that's kind of like, I mean, I live in a world, and you're very, very successful. You did. So you lived in a world where ultimately, like, the buck stops with you, right? Like the buck stops. There's no excuse. I can't point to anybody else. I had a case of I had one employee, and he started to poison the well, and it was somebody I was very loyal to. Okay. And he ended up poisoning the well, and there was nobody to blame but myself. That was a real learning experience for myself. Like I felt like I needed him to perform the work and to get the workload done. And if I could go back to my younger self, I'd really encourage my younger self, you don't want to be a slave to any one of your employees. And if somebody's poisoning the well, no matter their talent level, like, you got to let them go. You got to let them go. I would rather a B tech with an awesome attitude than an A tech with a terrible attitude. And that just is what it is. And I learned that the hard way, and lesson learned won't happen again.
One of the most dangerous things I've ever seen, and it's even more obvious to me now that I work as a coach and work with other shop owners, is nothing is more dangerous than when you have someone that manages from a place of fear.
Yeah, you probably walk into a place, just feel like shaking some people who are doing that and can't snap out of it.
Well, I mean, I've seen it many times over. When I worked for another company, we bought a lot of facilities, and we were buying, shops that weren't making a lot of profit, but had a good business. And it was an easy turn. But one of the things we found out was every time you would talk to someone about doing something, the answer was always, we can't do that. And it was coming from a place of fear. Well, we can't have that hard conversation with that employee. He'll just quit. I said, so then he quits. They said, we can't have that. We'll go under. I looked right at him and said, this is a multi-million-dollar operation. I'm not going to miss one problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I bet you looked at him dead of the eye like you're looking right now. This is
Yeah, and they did, and they've never been talked to that way. I mean, I actually have had the exact conversation with problem employees, and I was very blunt with them. Some people you just can't get through to them. And I had to tell one guy one time, I said, look, this is a multi-million-dollar operation. I'm not going to miss one guy.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to hold us hostage. Like, I understand you did that with the previous owner, and every time you'd go in and threaten to quit, he'd throw you a bunch of money. That's not happening today. That's not how we're going to do things. And then the guy just looked at me like, whoa. And he asked me, so are you giving me a raise? I said, no, I'm not giving you a raise.
Did you have to learn that lesson the hard way, or is that something that you kind of instinctually knew?
I think it's one of those things where I knew it instinctively, but there were too many instances where I was desperate. So I would do something against what my brain was telling me to do. And an example of that is hiring. I tell people, please do not hire from a place of desperation, because I guarantee you, if you look back, if you have any experience as an owner, and this is a good exercise for anyone listening, if you go back and look at some of your worst hires, I can almost guarantee you hired that person out of a place of desperation. And there were red flags that you chose to ignore because you just thought, I just got to get the work done.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that person. I can think of a few examples myself. That's 100% right. Yeah.
And then, that's not to say that you hire good. A lot of people do hire good, and then that employee goes through some major life change. Like one of the most devastating things that's ever happened to employees is when they go through major life changes, like a divorce or something like that. And those are sometimes unavoidable. It just happens. It's kind of a theory that I came up with years ago I said, running a business is like a bus route. And it's just natural for people to get on and people to get off. And that's okay. It's just like relationships you have in your life and in your personal life. Sometimes you outgrow friends. We go through stages. We've seen that. We graduate high school. We outgrow some of the friends we have. And it's not that that was a bad person. They're just not right for us anymore. And employees are the same way. It's okay if that employee outgrows you. Some of the greatest employees I've ever had came to me and said, I have this phenomenal job offer. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I said, you know what? You should take it. I had a guy come to me, he was a great, great tech, but he got an offer doing nothing but building engines all day in an air-conditioned shop. And that was his dream job. He even told us that when he got hired on, that's what he wanted to do, is build engines. And I said, You got to do it. You should go. He's like, well, are you sure? And I'm like, dude, I'm not going to hold you back. Like, that is what you should be doing. And yeah, was it hard for us? Yes. But that guy outgrew us, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I had a conversation with each and every one of my people. If somebody offers something better than I can offer you, then I encourage you to do it. Just give me the chance to fight for you. If somebody comes to you,
Right.
just see if I can match it or beat it. You know, and I know that that's certainly not a requirement. I mean, I think they understand why I'm saying that. You know, it's they're valuable. Like I've got personal relationships with everybody here, and they're valuable to the business and their skill set. But yeah, I would never discourage somebody from making a better move for themselves. In a perfect world, I would just like a chance to fight for them.
Well, and the other thing is too is it doesn't mean it's the end of the relationship. I think so many people are so short-minded that they think, well, that person left, that's the end of it. It's not. Things may change and they may want to come back, but I guarantee you one thing that if you handle it with grace and you handle it with the respect, that door's still open. Same way with customers. If you have a customer come to you and genuinely speaking, I get these calls as a coach all the time. They'll call me and say, this is what happened, and this person won't talk to me. And I said, well, can you blame them? Like, I genuinely understand why they don't want to deal with you anymore. I said, what you need to do is own it. You need to tell the customer, hey, we messed up. We totally agree. The door's open. We don't want to cut ties with you. And if you ever need us again, we're here. And handling things with grace and respect is going to go a long ways. And it's back to that whole thing. So many business owners have to do exactly what you were talking about earlier. They have to make a choice. Are we in it for the short term to make as much money as we can? Or are we in it for the long term and we're trying to build relationships? Basically, you got to ask yourself one thing. Are you a relationship shop or are you going to be a discount shop? Are you going to be a Jiffy Lube or do you want to be that place where people take problems no one else can solve? Because you really can only be one of those two things.
Yeah, I choose the long term. You know, I mean, all we got is our name, right? That's what we come into this earth with. That's what we leave this earth with. I want a good name. I want a good business. I want good relationships, and I did it right if I can do that.
Well, Nate, I want to thank you for sharing your story and giving us some of this insight into your operation. I really hope that the next 10 years are as good as the first 10 years. I think they will be for you.
You know what? To pat you on the back a little bit, it's people like you. You've dedicated time, and you and I have had a handful of conversations, and I know my questions probably seem elementary to you, kind of seeing where you are, but you're gracious and you share your insight, and I just learn a lot from listening to you and talking to you. So this was huge for me to have this chance, and really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's really what this is about. That's why I started this podcast was to help other shop owners and share messages from different points of view to help people out. Because I think so many shop owners think they're out on an island and a lot of them feel isolated that they've got situations that no one else is facing. And it's like other people have faced these things and there is a little bit of support out there. And that's why I encourage anyone, they can get a hold of me anytime. I mean, as you know, I'm very generous of my time. I'm willing to help people. And I don't really believe that there's dumb questions because we all come from a different place. And none of us were business owners until we decided to go out on our own. Most of us have a lot of technical training to fix trucks, but no one has taught any of us how to fix business. And that's ultimately what we are now. We had to change our identity to become a business owner.
No, people like you make it easier for people like me, and that's just an awesome gift. An awesome gift. Thank you.
Thank you.